latest episode of Surgeons' Lives. I'm your host, John Monson. Today we return to the UK and meet one of our younger guests, Samir Pathak, who is an HPB surgeon in Leeds in West Yorkshire. Indian by background, Samir's upbringing immersed him in the family business of medicine as well as cricket and charitable works. In this fascinating interview, we'll hear about his work within surgery, as well as the charitable works that he's done, following on from those of his father. He also discusses a fascinating phase of his life where he involved himself in a highly contentious issue of institutional racism within cricket, something that has lessons to be learned regardless of what the profession might be. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and please send us whatever comments you may have. Without further ado, let's go and listen to the fascinating conversation with Samir Pathak. I'm John Monson, and this is Surgeons' Lives. Welcome, Samir, to this little episode of Surgeons' Lives. I really appreciate you taking time today. You're talking to us today from Leeds in the UK, and as I do normally with people on this podcast, I will ask them just to start by saying a few words about their early life and background, starting with the words "I was born in."
So I was born in Hull, which will be a town you'll be familiar with, back in 1981, and spent all my formative years really in Hull. I went to school to Hymers College, and thereafter went on to Liverpool Medical School and did my first few years of training in Liverpool before obtaining my higher surgical training number down in the southwest. Then went down to the Bristol and Southwest in 2010. Worked in Yeovil and Bath and Bristol for a year and a half before coming back up to Leeds to do my higher degree. And then went back down to Exeter, Plymouth and Bristol to finish my training, where I was also an academic clinical lecturer towards the end of my training. And subsequently ended up moving to Leeds, which is where I am now. Now, in between all of those things, a few I'm sure we'll go into it in more detail during the next hour or so. But as you'll be aware, I played a lot of cricket and I've done a lot of other things in cricket. And one of the things that I underwent as a child, I had several operations myself. And I think those both underpinned my desire to be a doctor, probably more than anything, though there have been one or two other influences in that. So, yeah, that's a very quick snapshot of where I was born and where I've ended up.
So the medical side of the thing is might say a family business. I mean, your dad's a surgeon and your grandfather was a doctor?
Yes, he was. My father's father was a respiratory physician in India. He trained in, I think part of his training was in New York, as well as some training in the UK. And then he returned to India in the early 1950s and set up a sanatorium to treat tuberculosis as it was managed back then. It's obviously very different now. And we've continued to run that through our family over the last 75 years or so, following my grandfather's death. My father subsequently taken over the management. My father is somebody you will know. He worked in Hull as an orthopaedic surgeon, and obviously I've followed both of them into medicine. So, yeah, it is a family business, I guess.
And was it? I mean, you said that your influence to do medicine was associated with your own personal experience, of surgeries, etc., etc. But was it always the ambition?
So as far back as I remember, it always was my ambition, and I think it's probably been shaped by a few things. So, as mentioned, I had several operations. I was born with a congenitally absent right fibula. So, before the age of 10, I'd undergone 10 major operations at least, one of which left me in a wheelchair for about 6 months. I was quite involved in my own medical care even back in those days, and I knew what a Staph aureus infection was, for example. And so I think that really shaped my desire to kind of help people, particularly through surgery. Um, and I guess in the back of my mind, you're also influenced by your immediate family and those that you see all the time. So I guess that was an influence. But my sister did not go into medicine, for example. So it's something that was very personal to me. I wanted to be a doctor first and foremost. I remember as a child having there was something written down on my desk saying that I had two goals basically. One was to be a surgeon, the other was to be a first class cricketer. Now, didn't quite make the first class cricket, but almost did. So yeah, it was something that I was very, very keen on doing from a very early age, and I've never really faltered. The exact career path has changed a little bit. I think when I was at medical school, I initially thought about doing cardiac surgery, then possibly vascular surgery, but then like all of those things, I was influenced by people that you come across. So as a second year medical student, I came across Graham Poston in Liverpool. I hadn't realised that he was a liver surgeon at that time. We did a project on hernias, but my interest into liver surgery was opened up thereafter, or HPB surgery rather was opened up thereafter. And subsequently, lots of people have influenced my career. Yeah, and I guess that's the way that most surgeons will progress and learn as well. So I've ended up as a pancreatic surgeon in Leeds, and I've had a lot of people that have been very helpful towards my career.
It's a small world, Graham was my lecturer when I was first a senior lecturer in Imperial. I'm sure he would not like to admit to that.
He's been retired a few years now as Graham, and yeah, I enjoyed my early years working with Graham and the liver unit in particular in Liverpool, and then subsequently it was him that introduced me to Giles Toogood, who has had quite a profound influence on my career. In Leeds, I did my research for Giles back in. Oh, he was one of my supervisors, rather, back in 2012, and I've come back to Leeds. Andy Smith is somebody who's also been very influential in my career, somebody else who you will know well.
And when,
so I've been, yeah.
No, I was going to say, when you were in Liverpool, that was at the time that John Neoptolemus was there as well, I think.
Yeah. John Neoptolemus was there. The liver and pancreatic units were quite separate and have continued to be so throughout the years. It's very much the same in some other units across the UK, that the liver and pancreas are separate, and I think there is some benefit in having subspecialisation to that degree. A lot of units across the UK have mixed liver and pancreas as well.
So you wanted to be a first-class cricketer and wanted to be a first-class surgeon. As you say, you certainly achieved the second one, if not the first one, but almost. But did you have an ambition beyond that? Because, as you say, your career, I would say, is unusual, having various other well-known aspects to it. I mean, what was the surgical ambition at that time? Did you have a focused idea, or just were you following fate?
No, I think right from probably the end of medical school, I decided by that point that I wanted to be a HPB surgeon. My interest in research was opened by Graham Poston, I would say, because I did whilst still at medical school, I undertook a BSc in human anatomy and cellular biology. It's also another way of staying at med school for another year, which was all good fun at the time. But so I did a BSc and an MSc quite early in my surgical career. I did an MSc within a year or two of graduating, and then decided that I was going to do a higher degree. So I did all of that within a couple of years. I mean, the higher degree was challenging. I started off doing the basic science project, and you can run into difficulties, as you'll be aware, with basic science projects, and some of the results didn't really go my way. So I had to make was faced with a difficult challenge actually at that point in time, whether to abandon my MD or whether to switch and do a more clinically focused project. And obviously I was very determined, always have been, and chose to do a clinically focused project in which I undertook a systematic review, retrospective study, and a sort of pilot randomized control trial. And actually, it's that sort of clinical research that I've gone into later on in my career. So some things have happened by accident, but it was I remember being told by one of my academic supervisors that I didn't perhaps have the intellect to be able to complete a higher degree, which I took to say, well, I'll show you. So it's not been necessarily a smooth ride, I don't think. And where I returned to my training in Bristol, the unit had some difficulties towards the end of my training. So various things have meant that I've had to end up where I am, basically. And I'm in a good place now. I'm the surgical speciality lead for pancreatic cancer research now in the UK. So I think I was able to do a higher degree in the end.
So as you know, I'm also going to have as a guest on this podcast your esteemed father, who I've known for many years now, and I don't. So I'm not going to focus on him to any length here today. But other than to ask you, he followed a pathway in orthopedic surgery, and ended up in Hull as an associate specialist, and indeed has been quite an advocate for the associate specialist grade, if you like, over the years, to his credit. That was a struggle for him in his early career, etc. When you were pursuing your career, were you aware of that, the struggles that he'd gone through, or was it only something that you truly learned about later?
To be honest, probably something that I now realise. When you look at how medicine is structured and what the sort of different hoops you've got to jump through to get to certain places, I now understand kind of a lot of the sacrifices that would have been made to put both me and my sister through private school, for example, and all the support that we've had. But I don't think I really realised it at the time. What I'd say is that he was obviously a very strong role model. Probably I've talked about some of the people that have influenced my career. So he was probably the first person that influenced my career, because I had a direct role model right in front of me, both as a surgeon, a philanthropist in many ways, and also as a cricketer. And I've followed, hopefully, a lot of the things that he has done. Some I'd say I've done better, some probably not as good.
Well, he would have said, I think, that he almost made it in cricket as well. But he'll probably be very offended by that statement that I've just made on his.
So, well, he's not here, so I'll talk a little bit about the cricket side. I mean, we were, I'd say, similar in the cricket aspect, in that we're both wicketkeeper batsmen. He played at he started at university level, and then he went on to play in the Ranji Trophy, which is the equivalent of the county championship over here. So I think whilst you're at medical school, to be playing at that level and be able to get through medical school is quite an achievement. And I think he also played for East Zone, the combined universities of East Zone of India. So I think he was quite a renowned cricketer back in the day. But stopped. His cricket career was interrupted once he'd finished finished medical school essentially, and then came over here. And then obviously he played recreationally. But I think a lot of the skills that one acquires on the sports field are transferable to medicine. And in my case, I'm relatively similar in that I played age group cricket in Yorkshire, and then subsequently went on to university and captained Liverpool University, and I played for England universities during the same year I was doing my medical finals. And in fact, I was so engaged with cricket that I actually, at one point during my A-level years, was travelling to Headingley 3 times a week. So my attention probably drifted a bit more towards cricket than studies, and I ended up having to retake certain modules. So that was another lesson that I learned about how really you've got to be focused, how you've got to be manage your time much better. But they were the last set of things that I ever failed, because I realised kind of what you needed to do to in order to get through.
Did you ever have the day where you decided, I am not going to pursue professional cricket? Or
there's probably
realized that maybe weren't quite good enough, or what?
Yeah, I think there's probably 2 things there. So I think without doubt I probably wasn't quite good enough. You see the people that have really made it, and there's a difference. They are truly amazing. They pick up the ball, the where it's going, the length of the ball, and those sort of things much faster than ordinary or good club cricketers. And also, I think during medical school, I decided that what I really wanted to do was to be a surgeon, and for that, your fingers are quite important. So I remember breaking a finger playing a club match, probably around 4th or 5th year, and I thought that I probably should focus more on surgery and possibly less on playing cricket. But my interest and enthusiasm with cricket has never really gone away, and I've started doing other things within cricket. So I've set up a small charity. I've done a lot of administration within cricket and those sort of things.
It is definitely, having bent and broken fingers is definitely not the ideal equipment set for surgery. I had similar experience myself when I was racing motorbikes, and I realized that a lot of the more experienced bike racers had bent fingers or broken fingers, or indeed missing fingers. And I thought, yeah, this is not the ideal set for it. So like you, I decided to stop. Now, so there you are. You've become a consultant, successful consultant in the last 5 years or so, and your career is on the up, as they say. You're rising up through the ranks, etc. Yet you decide to take on a topic which would at the very least be considered a risky venture, and namely that's in the space of race relations in cricket. Did you go into that? You must have gone into that with your eyes open, or did you? What was your thinking in that? Because that's for a young guy starting a career in a country that in a profession that's very conservative and doesn't shift easily, and in a country that's pretty conservative. Tell me about that thought process.
So I first heard about the story when it broke in September 2020.
And maybe, I'm sorry to interrupt. Maybe for the listener, give them like 1 minute on the story.
So September 2020, a story broke in Wisden about allegations of racism at Yorkshire County Cricket Club. and obviously, having at this point, I was in Bristol, and I was very interested. I've always been very interested in Yorkshire cricket, so I was just reading it and looking at it and thinking, I wonder what's happened here. About a week or so after the story broke, I got a call from the then chairman of Yorkshire County Cricket Club, saying, we'd like you to chair this committee to further investigate these allegations. And I mean, I remember, I can't remember the exact details, but I did spend a day or two thinking about whether it was the right thing to do, and speaking to various people. Ultimately, I knew that it was a poisoned chalice, in that whatever you found, one side or the other is probably not going to like it. But ultimately, my goal at that point in time, and still is, it was to move the dial forwards and move cricket forwards and move Yorkshire cricket forwards, so that actually it became a more inclusive game for more people. And that was my thought process then, and it's still my thought process now.
Did people advise you to do it or not to do it, or both?
Most people I spoke to suggested doing it. There were a few people that said, well, you could end up in a bit of bother here, because people are not going to necessarily like what you may or may not find. Now, in the end, our investigation was actually, it's never been publicly released. Unfortunately, media and social media and other political interference overtook, and so the initial report remains unpublished.
Is that a frustration to you?
It is, and it was certainly more at the time. I think ultimately what we did at that point in time, with the resource available to us. So one of the first things that I did when I was appointed chair, I think one of the things that you've got to recognise is what is within your capability and what's not. And I think it's true of anything in life. You don't have to be the best of something, but you have to know to recruit the best people into your team. So one of the first things I did was to get an expert in HR, an expert with legal, somebody with legal expertise onto the team. So I knew that we had a really good, robust team to examine everything in detail. So we looked at all the policies that Yorkshire produced, whether they'd complied with them. There were interviews of around 30 key people at that time. We worked with a legal firm, SPB. All of these things obviously take time as well, and that's one of the difficulties, I think, when you're investigating something like this. It's really important to be fair to both the accuser, but also very importantly to be fair to those who've been accused. And I think Mike Atherton probably has written the most eloquently about this, about why process really matters. I think that would be my takeaway from this. I mean, ultimately, if I look at that report now, I know it's not been published, but there are definitely things in there that we got wrong.
Sure.
But ultimately, at that point in time, with the available evidence, they were on the balance of probabilities what we thought was right at that time.
But what did it result in because forces determined that the report was never published, but it didn't stop people asking you or asking those involved what they found. And in other words, was it true?
Yeah, I've never really gone too much into kind of exactly what the report said. I've never really spoken to anyone in the media about it. The report has been leaked, and a lot of the media outlets have it already. And certain bits from it were taken and extrapolated and made into headlines. But ultimately what's happened, unfortunately, has happened. Some good people have been tarnished in the process as well. The important thing is that we learn from what's happened, and that these mistakes and learnings have occurred from what has happened, so that should such an event ever happen again, people are in a better place to really investigate properly.
So that's a great HR term, Samir, learnings, learnings. You're obviously trained well by the HR people, but so, but tell me, so what were the main learnings from the experience,
So I think
and have they been learned?
so. I think for me, one of the learnings was probably thinking about how it's almost like writing a paper. Actually, is that you have this great idea, and it's how you publish it at the end. So thinking about how whatever we found would be publishable was probably something to consider. But of course, you don't know what you're going to find before you start the investigation. Um, One of the things that occurred was that there's probably a discrepancy between what the panel thought and what the legal team at SPB thought. I think that's something that at the start of the investigation we probably didn't quite anticipate. Nonetheless, it didn't really matter in the end because sort of there was some political interference and it reached DCMS before the report was really digestible to anyone.
GCMS?
I've forgotten exactly what it stands for now, but it's one of the political culture and sport and
Media.
I forgot exactly what it stands for.
Department of Culture, Sport and Media.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So did you emerge from this saying, I'm really glad I did that, or never do it again? Because that's just, I had my hands tied behind my back. I had
so probably a bit. I think as a human, you go through all of these emotions that I'm never doing that again, or actually reflecting back. I think there's some really useful things. I think one of the things that was really difficult, actually, as you alluded to, this was about 4 or 5 years ago. I was still a locum consultant at that point. At that point in time, I was in Bristol. I'd just had our first child, who was being born around that time. And we were also relocating from Bristol to Leeds. So it was quite a difficult period of life. And almost every evening was lengthy telephone calls, lengthy Zoom calls, whilst trying to establish your career, whilst trying to settle the family. So it was definitely a difficult period, I think. It might be interesting to hear what my wife thought about it.
I was going to say that.
I wonder what she'd say. But I did it because for me, it was really important. I think that we tackled these issues head on, and it's really important. I think cricket is something that I'm really passionate about, and I want to make sure that it moves in a positive direction.
So two questions. One quick question: Did you gain more friends than you lost during this process, or the other way around?
I don't know. Actually, I've not really thought about that. I think you certainly do gain some friends. I think because by talking things through with various people, the people that you work with on the panel. But I'm also sure that there are people that disagree with your views and other things, and so I suspect it's a bit of both, actually.
And follow on. That's part of 10 years, really. Could it happen tomorrow? What happened?
So could it
happened then? Could it happen tomorrow?
Yeah, I think it could, because it's ultimately an allegation around racism, and that can happen anytime in any setting. And I think as a society, like I said, it's the process that matters. And we need to make sure in workplaces, and I've been involved in similar things in the workplace where certain people have asked me for my advice about how to deal with a particular situation or scenario that may have arisen.
So have you there's a famous book written by a guy called Bob Sutton called The No Asshole Rule. It's a wonderful book. I always recommend it to people. He's an engineer from Stanford. And as he said, when the book became very successful, one of the side effects was that he became known as the asshole guy. And people used to go to him about behavior issues,
Yeah,
etc. Have you become the racism guy?
I don't think so. I haven't had, I've had a few inquiries around those sort of things at work. Um, I've sort of gone back to a lot of the other activities I used to do within cricket. So I was on the work as well. I've just come off the as a trustee of the MCC Foundation, um, and I've gone back to kind of focusing on my kind of cricket charitable activities. So I think that's made me more aware of the current scene within England and what the challenges within cricket are, and the ICEC report and some of those things. And through our charity, what we've tried to do, what we've been doing over the last several years, is bring talented but underprivileged cricketers from India to the UK. And a few of those cricketers have gone on to play for India. But actually, what we suddenly realised was that a lot of these cricketers are talented, and actually, if we bring them over at 12 years old, well, that's great. But actually, even if we hadn't brought them over at 16 or 17, they'll probably be here anyway. But one of the things that we did was to bring some really underprivileged cricketers, so people that are orphans. So one particular child witnessed his parents' suicide aged 6. He watched them burn to death because of extreme poverty. So bringing that sort of child that's never been out of an orphanage in Mumbai to a school in Durham, and seeing the way he progressed and how actually cricket and learning English and coming here, that's literally transformed the trajectory of his life. So he's now a cricket coach in Mumbai. So we're focusing a little bit more on kind of those things, and also we're supporting a lady to attend Bradford Grammar School currently. She lives in Bradford, and interestingly is playing for Lancashire second team rather than Yorkshire. But so I think we'd like to support more local cricketers and also expand to other cricket playing nations. So yeah, certainly doing the racism work during those periods, it took me away from trying to work for these sorts of things, because one only has so much time in a day, alongside trying to do a surgical job and a bit of research as well. But yeah,
Possibly, or probably helped in the long run by, gave you a little more profile, I guess, and
yeah, there is definitely that. Again, you don't do it for those reasons.
No, of course.
Indirectly, you do acquire some better connections throughout the game. Yeah.
Maybe I may be wrong. I'm sure you'll correct me, but Yorkshire's experience with overseas players, is comparison to other counties, of course, is relatively recent. But I think I'm correct in saying that after the first Indian player they had, it's all been essentially downhill. Is that correct? As in,
well, the first player happened to be one of the greatest of all time, so it's really difficult to use that as a benchmark, I think.
Exactly.
But, yeah, it was quite an achievement, really, for Sachin Tendulkar to come across in 1992. I think it was a hard act to follow.
And he was just 16 at the time, I think, wasn't he?
He was 19, I think. He'd been on. Yeah, he'd played for India, I think, for 3 or 4 years. But I think he made his debut in 1989 against Pakistan, and then was touring Australia at that point in time. And I think it was Craig McDermott, one of the Australians, was actually supposed to come to Yorkshire, but got injured, and so they ended up getting Sachin across.
So let's pivot now and return back to the other side of your life. Are you optimistic about the NHS at the moment? It's had yet another report written by Lord Darcy, or at least published by Lord Darcy. I think even he would admit that articulate the message from his report was pretty obvious to everyone. It's how you articulate it, though, of course. I don't know if you saw his first part or second part of his podcasts, but I mean, he's fairly open about why the NHS is broken. Do you
So I think it's.
are you optimistic or not?
So I think it's under strain. It's, I don't understand the financial, all the financial infrastructures, but it's probably slightly underfunded, under resourced, and there is a morale is low generally. But the NHS, I've thought about this a lot, and I think ultimately what you can do is control what you can control. And by that, I mean you can just make your team environment as pleasant as it possibly can be. And again, I'll go back to some of the people that I've mentioned three of them. I've mentioned Andy Smith, Giles Toogan, Graham Postman. There's another person, and he's been interviewed on your podcast earlier this year, Neil Smart. Somebody that I was very close to, and unfortunately he passed away in June. But one of the things that I really remember about Neil was what joy it was to work with him and for him, and how generous he was with his time to anybody, from F1 med student up to senior consultants. He was the same with everybody, and really gave time to a lot of people. And certainly Neil's passing has made me reflect more about that, more about how I would like to be as a consultant, that I would like to give the same opportunities really that he gave to all of his trainees. And so I can't talk about the NHS as a whole. I think the NHS as a whole is underfunded, is under resourced, but I think individually, if we all pull together and all be a bit more like Neil, then I think the NHS will do okay.
Yeah, that's very. I mean, so there's two pieces to that, of course. One is Neil, who clearly that he was a truly exceptional individual. Many people have talents in one area or another, etc. But Neil was truly exceptional. He was an exceptional intellect for a start. But very, very understated.
Yeah. So I first met Neil. Sorry, John.
Well, I was going to say, because he wasn't working in a so-called famous place, university, etc. People, I think, massively underestimated him in terms of his intellectual capacity and his determination. But he just annoyingly, he just didn't have deficiencies. I mean, he was just very, very exceptional. I mean, I did tell him that he was the only person to appear on the podcast with a nasoventral feeding tube in his, and it was a shameless attempt to create viewership, etc. A remarkable individual, and he asked, as you know, to do that interview because he wants people to hear his story and not do what he did.
I mean, Neil was remarkable. I think you're right. He didn't really have a chink in his armour. He was the model doctor. He went out of his way for patients, for junior staff, senior staff, everybody. Overly generous. Exceptionally bright, exceptionally good technically as well. I first came across him. I was a first-year registrar down in Yeovil, and he was just finishing training. So I spent a year with Neil in Yeovil, and then we ended up living. His last job as a trainee was in Bristol, and we moved from Yeovil, and I actually shared a flat with Neil for 6 months. So we lived together, and then after I'd finished my MD, I ended up going. He'd become a consultant by that time in Exeter. So when I returned after my period of research in Leeds, my first job was working for Neil as Neil and Ian Daniels down in Exeter. I just had it was a really excellent job, and obviously since then I'd remained very close to Neil, and he'd always, to be honest, we talked about the racism investigations earlier. He actually even helped guide me through some of that, whether to do it, whether not to, and he'd always, even when facing professional difficulties about what jobs to go for, how to approach certain situations, he just always had time.
Yeah. Fascinating guy, and he when he did his interview with me, I always I thought at the time it must have been extraordinarily difficult for him to do it. And certainly wasn't easy for me to do it with him, but I think he found a little solace in doing it, and I know we found a little solace from the thousands and thousands of people from around the world who contacted him as a consequence of that interview. I mean, it's over 10,000 people have either seen it or listened to it. So it was I'm glad it's there for people to watch. Mm-hmm. So moving to much less profound issues, see if we can find out the real Samir now. So I'm sure, because you brought up in a sporting environment, you have asked numerous people for autographs. If you could only keep one autograph, which would it be?
One autograph of anybody that's ever existed.
Yeah.
So I could seek the autograph, or is this somebody whose autograph I've already got?
Yeah, you could seek it. It's either one you have or one you would like.
So the one I've got, I'd say I'd keep Sachin Tendulkar's autograph. As alluded to, I think he's the greatest batsman that I've seen, and a wonderful human being as well. So that would be the autograph that I'd keep. I think one that I'd like to get would be maybe, I don't know, fairly contrasting here, but Mahatma Gandhi, because he kept, how he went about achieving what he achieved. It would be, I guess when seeking the autograph, I wouldn't have time to go into detail with that. Probably the other one, in complete contrast to Mahatma Gandhi, would be George Best.
Yes. So that George Best triggers a question that I will ask you as a sportsman and I'm going to deem you now as a sports captain, a leader. Okay, I had the occasion to ask Ian Botham once if he was in charge of the team, would he like on his team the solid grinder or the flawed genius? Which one would he pick for his team? I'm sure you can imagine which one he said.
I'm not sure it's a very easy choice, that, because I think as a leader, what's your goal? Your goal is to win matches, probably to please, to play an appealing style of whatever game it is. But ultimately, it's to bring a team together. Now, what brings a team together? Is it the individual, or is it a flawed genius? The flawed genius, I think, requires very careful management, and they often press the self-destruct button sometimes. So, I've seen that with young cricketers as well. Those that have enormous potential, but sometimes give it away because they don't actually realise how good they are. And at a young age, you get a lot of money very quickly, particularly through things such as the IPL. And when you've come from from a very humble background and you get rich very quickly, you're not sure who you don't have that same firm foundation, so you don't really know who your true friends are and who you're not, who's giving you sound advice, who's not.
Ready for life.
So it's very easy sometimes to criticize some of those people that suddenly it appears that they just drank their life away.
That being said, so I'm going to ask you then, I'm going to make you choose between Mike Atherton and Ian Botham.
On my team.
Well, one is, you know, a flawed genius.
So I'd pick. I'd pick Mike Atherton. Without a doubt, because I tell you, so obviously, well, I like reading his articles. I think he's very articulate. I think he's very intelligent. I think, particularly, I don't know what he's like during his playing days, but I imagine that he's very good at drawing people together now. So I would, in my team, have Mike Atherton any day.
But he would never have had.
I love them both, just to be clear.
No, that's for sure. But
yeah,
you would never have had the Headingley test.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I mean, Ian Botham is as good as they get. So I wouldn't like to choose between them.
That day.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
That's what you get. That's what you get with somebody like, you know, because they are so good. They genuinely believe that they are unbeatable, and that's not something I think you can necessarily install into somebody. It's like being a surgeon, though, isn't it? You'll come across people where they have this unbelievable, I can do anything, and in surgery that can actually be a dangerous trait as well.
I mean, inherently, surgery is a strange profession. To think that you get up in the morning and go to work, and the first thing you do is stick a knife in someone. It is an interesting profession. So you have rented a log cabin in the mountains for the weekend. You have to choose 3 people from history, alive or dead, I don't care, who you would like to spend not an hour with, but the weekend with. Who would you choose?
I think some of the people that we've just discussed would be...
well, they're not available.
Very interesting. They're not available. They're tied up.
Sorry.
Okay. Maybe very controversial, but possibly some of the leaders of the UK during COVID times, to find out what they thought they were doing.
And who are we choosing? Boris?
Probably Boris, to find out exactly, whether I get the truth or not remains to be seen.
Boris is there. He's installed.
Boris, so I've put Boris there. Probably not his whole family, just Boris himself.
There's enough room for his whole family.
Yeah. Who else would I have? I'd want to choose somebody that's not a cricketer, actually. Another great sports personality. Maybe Johnny Wilkinson. He's somebody that I've always admired, how he managed to, off it the wrong foot under such pressure in 2003, kick that goal, kick the... So I go with Johnny Wilkinson to understand his kind of psychology and how he extracted, because he probably wasn't the most talented rugby player, but he extracted the maximum ability from his talent. So I'd like to know about that. I really quite like cooking as well. So I think if we're in a lodge and we've got the entire weekend, I guess the thing to think about is what type of cooking I'd really want to learn about. Barbecue would be quite good, I reckon, in a lodge. I don't know. Any of the television chefs, I think, would be great to spend a bit of time with to really improve my culinary skills.
Ramsey in there with Boris and Johnny Wilkinson.
Could be lively. Could be.
It could be very lively.
Would be lively. There'd be some profound words used, I'd have thought.
If you could watch one cricket match in one ground, who would be the teams and which would be the ground?
So that's I'd say, no, I was going to say it's an easy question, because I was going to say India, England, Lords, and that was just the other week. But So I'd watch that game again any time. But I've watched a lot of cricket at Lords, having being an MCC member and all of those things. But I think I'd like to uh, watch a little bit more cricket in India. Actually, I haven't watched. I've watched a little bit of IPL, a few Test matches, but I'd love to go to watch a Test match. I think at Eden Gardens, where there's 100,000 people there.
Okay.
Been to the. I watched in 1992. I watched England versus Pakistan actually in the World Cup final at the MCG. It was really interesting actually because again this was a family trip. My dad had obviously taken our whole family, and Peter Lee was there as well. And
Yes.
obviously Peter and Tom were supporting England, as were we. But none of Australia could understand why people that were already brown were not supporting Pakistan. So they just couldn't understand why we were supporting England.
Yes, the Australians are quite binary. They're binary individuals. Very
At
simple.
least you know where you stand with them.
Let me finish by asking you two questions. One is, what advice would you give to a young surgeon starting out to how they should cope with the pressures of a 21st century surgical career, and perhaps it allows you the opportunity. But the second question is, what's the best piece of advice you ever received?
So I've received some good bits of advice, but I think if I was starting my career again, I'd do a lot of the same things. I'd perhaps, certainly in the earlier few years, thought a little bit more about work-life balance. It comes, but it's taken quite a long time to get to that point. I think surgery is hard. You do have to put the hard yards in. There's not an easy way of achieving what you want to. You've got to pass FRCS. You've got to, particularly in surgery, it's competitive. So you've got to mark yourself out from other people. Although I do believe that we're moving from an era of competition to collaboration. I think that helps achieve better results. So I think you've got to be able to work hard. You've got to be flexible, but I think you've got to find time for yourself, I think, because it's surgery is the long game. You've got to last till you're 70 odd nowadays. I think in terms of advice, I think a few things that I've been told is one of the things is do a few things and do them really well. So don't try and spread yourself too thin. Don't try and take on too many projects. And it's a Giles Toogood saying, but lift as you climb, essentially. So there are plenty of people. There are two types of successful people. There are those that on their way up, they help other people to climb as well. And if you're one of those people, you'll tend to get propelled higher and higher. And there are other types of successful people that like to trample down on others. And probably don't be one of those, because when you reach the top, there'll be a lot of people waiting to get you.
Yes, for sure. I think, and I think, increasingly, as you say, surgery is perceived as being very competitive, and it is very competitive. But increasingly I see real evidence that the competition is nonsense. It's not beneficial to anyone, including the most competitive people, because they get medals in this and they're presidents of that, and etc., etc. But what's it for? So it's too individual.
What are we here for? Well, ultimately, we're here to make the patients better, and also to look after and support each other. And so I don't think we have to be overly. We've got to realise what is it that we're really trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I think it's that contribution thing, as I've discussed with other people who've been involved in medical politics and mainstream politics. A surgeon can touch the lives of 10,000 people. A real process and policy change can touch the lives of 10 million people. and it's one is suited for one group of people, and the other group of people. But they both make it, as you say, it's both in ultimately for the benefit of the mission. Well, Samir, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to talk about stuff that I think truly, I call this Surgeons' Lives, but as you know, the subtitle is Stuff That Matters, and I think some of the stuff that you've been talking about today truly is stuff that matters. So I want to thank you for spending time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.